You've been performing for so long, you forgot who you were before the applause. You don't need a new identity. You need to come home to the one you abandoned. It's time to change the narrative. It's time to recognize who you are. You are not an imposter. You are not a mistake. You are not a placeholder in your own life. You already knew. You already knew the answer before you asked the question. You already knew the work was good before you sent that email asking what someone else thought. You already knew you were qualified before you spent 45 minutes scrolling through someone else's credentials to measure yourself against theirs. You already knew, and yet you waited, you circled back, you softened your voice, tilted your head, and asked permission from someone who, if we are being completely honest, has never had to carry the weight you carry or navigate the rooms you walk into every single day. I want you to sit with that for a second, not with shame. I'm not here for that, but with clarity. Because the very act of seeking validation from someone who does not actually hold authority over your competence, that act is costing you something. It is costing you your self-trust. It is costing you your time. And most painfully, it is costing you your relationship with the most reliable source of information you have ever had access to, yourself. Today, we are not going to talk about how to get better at earning validation. We are going to talk about how to stop needing it. We are going to talk about how to read the room, the right room, the one inside you. Read the room. You don't need validation. Welcome to the Impostor Phenomenon podcast. I am Dr. Rogers, and if you are new here, welcome. I am so glad you found this space. This podcast exists because there is a very specific kind of exhaustion that high achievers carry, and nobody talks about it with the honesty it deserves. It is the exhaustion of being deeply capable and yet perpetually uncertain, of doing extraordinary things while running a constant internal audit of whether any of it actually counts. This show is where we name that experience, examine it, and most importantly, give you real tools to move through it instead of being trapped by it. If you have been here before, you already know I am not going to gaslight you, and I am not going to pathologize you either. What I am going to do is tell you the truth about what is happening inside you, why it is happening, and what you can do about it today, not someday. Today's episode is about something that sits right at the intersection of imposter phenomenon and self-trust, and that is the habit of seeking external validation for things you already know. I am talking about the pattern where you do the work, you know the work, and then before you can let yourself believe any of it, you reach outside yourself for someone else to confirm it. A mentor, a colleague, a friend, a stranger on the internet, anybody whose approval might finally make it feel real. And I want to say something about that pattern right now before we go any further. It is not weakness. It is not laziness. It is not some character flaw that you have to be embarrassed about. It is a deeply learned, deeply human response to years, sometimes decades, of environments that told you explicitly or implicitly that your own self-assessment could not be trusted, that you needed external confirmation to make your knowing legitimate. But here's what we are going to do about it today. I'm going to introduce you to a framework I call READ. It stands for R, reflect, E, evaluate, A, adjust, and D, dismiss. And by the time this episode is over, you are going to have a real, practical, immediately usable tool for the next time you feel that pull, that familiar, almost compulsive reach towards someone else's opinion about something you already know. Stay with me. We are going to go deep today, and it is going to be worth it. Let us talk about the validation trap, what it is, why it exists, and what it is actually doing to you. Validation seeking at its core is the act of outsourcing your self-assessment to someone outside yourself. It is the moment when you take a question that belongs to you. Am I good enough? Is this idea worthy? Do I belong in this room? And you hand it to someone else to answer. And I want to be really precise here because there is an important distinction. Asking for feedback on a specific thing, a draft, a decision, a strategy, that is not validation seeking. That is collaboration. That is healthy. What I'm talking about is something different. It is the need for someone else's confirmation before you can allow yourself to believe something you have already assessed to be true. Why do we do this? Because most of us were trained to do it. Think about the systems most high achievers move through on their way to where they are today. Schools, families, workplaces, industries. Many of those systems had a clear, unspoken message. Your self-assessment is suspect. Your confidence needs to be verified. Wait for the grade, wait for the review, wait for someone with authority to tell you what you are worth. And if you happen to be the first in your family to go to college, or the only woman in the room, or the only person who looked like you at the table, that message was often louder, more persistent, and delivered with far more force. So you learn to wait, you learn to check, you learn to soften your knowing with a question mark at the end of every statement. And now you are brilliant, accomplished, capable, and still waiting, still checking, still asking. Here is where imposter phenomenon enters the picture, and I want you to understand the specific mechanism, the imposter voice. And you know the one I mean, the one that sounds almost reasonable, almost logical, just factual enough to be convincing. That voice has a very specific job. Its job is to tell you that the gap between who you are and who you are supposed to be is too large to be concealed. It tells you that you are operating on borrowed time, borrowed credibility, borrowed luck. And when it is running on full volume, it tells you one particular thing that drives the validation trap harder than anything else. You cannot trust your own assessment. So you look for someone else's assessment instead, not because their assessment is more accurate, but because the imposter has convinced you that yours is fundamentally unreliable. Now let us talk about what this costs you, because the cost is real and I want to name it directly. Chronic validation seeking erodes self-trust over time. Every time you outsource your self-assessment to someone else and then act on their answer instead of yours, you send yourself a message. My judgment is not enough. And your nervous system files that message. It files it and it retrieves it the next time you need to make a decision. So the cycle deepens, the dependency grows, and the distance between you and your own knowing gets wider. It also keeps you perpetually in motion without ever arriving. Because here is the thing about validation from external sources. It is never permanent. You get it, you feel it for a moment, and then the next situation arises and you need it again. It does not accumulate into self-trust. It just delays the moment when you have to reckon with yourself. And then there is the dimension I want to name very specifically because some of you are living in it right now, gaslighting. There are environments, workplaces, relationships, systems that do not just passively benefit from your validation seeking. They actively exploit it. They see your self-doubt and they feed it. Because a person who does not trust her own knowing is a person who is far easier to control, to dismiss, to underutilize, and to underpay. When you walk into a room already questioning yourself, you hand that room enormous power over you, and some rooms take it. I'm going to come back to this throughout today's episode because the framework is not just a tool for managing imposter feelings. It is a tool for protecting yourself from the environments that weaponize those feelings. And here is the reframe I want to offer before we go any further. Validation seeking is not a character flaw. It is a survival response. And survival responses can be unlearned when you have better tools. That is exactly what the framework is, a better tool. I want to introduce the framework clearly before we go step by step, because the whole matters as much as its parts. This is not just an acronym, it is a practice. It is the thing you do actively, consciously, deliberately, the next time you feel that pull. The reach towards someone else's opinion about something you already know. Instead of reaching out, you read the room. Specifically, you read the most important room there is, the one inside yourself. R is for reflect. Before you reach, you pause and turn inward. E is for evaluate. You test your reflection against the actual evidence, not the imposter's version of the evidence. A is for adjust. Based on what you have reflected on and evaluated, you make a deliberate, calibrated shift in your narrative, your behavior, or your environment. D is for dismiss. You consciously and unapologetically release the imposter voice, the gaslighting narrative, and the need for validation you never actually needed in the first place. Let us go deep on each one. R is for reflect. And I want to start by telling you what this step is not, because the word reflect can sound passive, almost soft, like something you do sitting cross-legged with a candle. That is not what I mean. In the context of the framework, reflect is an act of precision. It is the deliberate decision to turn toward yourself before you turn toward anyone else. It is the pause before the reach. And for high achievers, it is frequently the hardest step, because pausing feels like losing ground when the imposter is telling you your competence is always under review. Here is what reflect means in practice. The next time you feel the pull, the urge to send the email, make the call, post a question, ask for the opinion you are not sure you actually need, you stop. You get quiet enough to hear yourself. Not the imposter, not the anxiety, yourself. The person who has the track record, the training, and the actual evidence of what you know and what you have done. And while you are in that quiet, you ask yourself 4 specific questions. I am going to give them to you now. And I want you to write these down or bookmark this episode, because these 4 questions are a practice. Question 1. What do I already know about this situation? Not what am I afraid is true? What do I actually know? Question 2. What am I afraid of? And is that fear based on evidence, or is it the imposter's voice running a story? Question 3. If I already knew the answer, what would it be? Sit with that one, because most of the time you already know. Question 4. Am I seeking validation, or am I seeking permission? And who gave someone else the authority to grant it? That 4th question is the one I want to press on, because it gets at something critical. There is a difference between needing someone else's expertise or perspective and needing someone else's permission to trust yourself. Validation seeking is almost always about permission, not information. And when you name it that way, when you look at the reach and call it what it is, it loses some of its grip. Let me walk you through a single scenario using all 4 steps in real time. You are going to see how they flow. You have just finished a piece of work you are proud of. It is the best thing you have produced in months, maybe years. And the familiar impulse surfaces. You want to send it to someone before you submit it, publish it, or deliver it. Not for a specific piece of information, just to feel sure, to feel approved of, to feel like someone else has signed off on what you already know. You catch the impulse, and this is where you start the framework. Reflect. You pause. You ask the 4 questions. What do I already know about this? I know it is strong. What am I afraid of? That it's not as good as I think. Is that based on evidence? No. If I already knew the answer, what would it be? I would submit it. Am I seeking validation or permission? Permission. Who gave them the authority to grant it? Nobody. Evaluate. You look at the evidence. You examine your actual track record. You look at what you know about the person you were going to ask and whether their judgment on this particular thing is actually more reliable than yours. It is not. You also ask yourself, is this doubt internal or is it being generated by something outside me? In this case, it is internal. It is the imposter, not the environment. That distinction matters. Adjust. You update the narrative. This is ready. I am ready. I do not need someone to co-sign what I have already assessed to be true. You adjust the behavior. You submit it. Without the email, without the safety net, with the trust in your own knowing. Dismiss. The imposter makes one more pass, but what if? And you dismiss it. You have looked at it, you have evaluated it, it does not get a vote in this decision, and you close the browser tab before you can talk yourself out of it. That is the framework in action, from first impulse to final decision in real time with full self-possession. The mindset shift at the center of this framework is this. You are moving from, I need someone to tell me I am enough to, I already have the information I need. I just need to read it. You're not going outward for data you do not have. You are going inward for data you have always had and have been taught not to trust. And here's the thing I want you to carry out of this episode more than anything else. The most important room you will ever read is the one inside yourself. The evidence of your competence lives there. The record of what you have survived and what you have built and what you have figured out against the odds. It lives there. Your worth, not conditional, not provisional, not dependent on someone else's confirmation, it lives there. You do not need to go outside yourself to find it. You need to get quiet enough to read it. All right, let us close today with the framework one more time. And I want to give you a single memorable sentence for each pillar, something you can carry with you. R, reflect. Before you reach outward, turn inward, because the pause before the reach is where your self-trust lives. E, evaluate. Test your reflection against the actual evidence, not the imposter's version of it, because your record is real and it belongs to you. Next is adjust. Make the deliberate, courageous shift in your narrative, your behavior, or your environment without waiting for certainty that will never arrive before the action. D, dismiss. Consciously, unapologetically, and with full self-possession, release the imposter voice, the gaslighting, and the need for validation you never actually needed in the first place. Here's your challenge before the next episode. The next time you feel that pull, the reach, the familiar impulse to outsource your self-assessment to someone else, I want you to pause. I want you to read the room. Reflect on what you already know. Evaluate the actual evidence. Adjust your narrative, your behavior, or your environment based on what the evidence actually says. And dismiss the voice, internal or external, that was never going to give you anything but a delay. And then I want you to come tell us about it. Find us on social media, find us in the show notes, and share your read framework moment. Tell us what you dismissed. Tell us what you adjusted. Tell us what you discovered when you finally got quiet enough to hear yourself, because your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to do the same thing for the first time. You already know what to do. Read the room, the one inside yourself. That is where the answer has always lived. So take a breath, settle in, and let's begin the work of separating who you are from who you've been performing to be, because it's time to stop performing and start belonging. Welcome to the work. Welcome to the becoming. Welcome to unmasking the imposter. Thank you for listening to the Impostor Phenomenon podcast. If today's episode opens something in you, share it with someone who needs this conversation too. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. And if you're ready to go deeper, get ready to join our community where we're doing the real work of reclaiming identity, rewriting narratives, and rebuilding belonging from the inside out. Remember, you are not an imposter. You are not a mistake. You are the author, and your story is far from finished.